All right, folks, for those of you who have been with us throughout the day, and if not, if you're catching this later via YouTube or in a recording, welcome to our fourth session of our Social Community Social Justice virtual symposium. And for this hour, our final hour, we're really bringing it home for Social Work Month with social work students who are actively a part of the UNC Charlotte MSW and BSW programs who are speaking from their perspectives when it comes to the work of social work students, what we can do to improve and support communities. One thing we talked about earlier was social work's ability to kind of heal from some of the bureaucratic and some of the trauma and some of the ways that we have been a part of the system that has been oppressive and repressive in society, as well as be more forward facing. And for those students who are coming in your shoes, either to, taking in the seats that you were once sitting in or to continue on the work, how would you consider them in 2026 as we're in a very, likely very different place than we were in when you first started within whatever program in your education? How do you guide them in their work too? So we'll start with one of our returning is a veteran of our RASE webinars, Ms. Jocelyn Abarca, who is joining us. And also, if you go to the RAISE YouTube page and view our racial justice and social work quick video, you will also see Jocelyn's work there. So when I say a veteran, I'm saying she has been down for the cause for quite some time. So definitely want to put Jocelyn on here. Jocelyn, please share with the people who you are, the work that you do, and just a bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you, Professor Mills. Well, I'm currently a BSW senior. I have been a part of the social work for all 4 years of my undergrad, and I'm about to graduate in May, and I will be starting my master's right after, 2 weeks after graduation. So that's very exciting. And right now, I'm currently placed at a K through 8 charter school, so I work alongside with a lot of children, K through 8 specifically. And right now, I've currently been working a lot with neurodiverse students. So I've been diving deep into the population and the way how IEPs and 504s reflect and affect students. And I think it's just been so valuable to see like the differences in the way that it affects students and how it benefits them as a whole to be able to fulfill them socially, emotionally, and academically for their future. As being a social worker intern at my placement, it has definitely challenged me to see different things, to see a lot of disparities that a lot of students go through, whether if it's outside of school, in school, whether if it's with family or whatever the case may be. It has given me an insight in the way how social issues very much affect students in the education system and even outside and how they intertwine and how different things affect students and their well-being as well. Um, there has been a lot of situations that I have came across that have questioned my abilities and very much have questioned my just effect in being able to pursue social work and being able to set my foot as a social work and advocate and engage and dive deeper within these populations. And specific, I have worked alongside with a lot of the immigrant community, as we do have a lot of students who come from immigrant families. And I have seen a lot of social issues with all of the ICE stressors, anxiety, and just feeling isolated and exploited, and how that just affects families so much. And it's just so important to be able to see that and engage and be able to use the resources that I can to help these families and help these students thrive academically. Because school is a safe place, and that's where a lot of students considered a safe place. So it's important for me to be able to guide that and be able to continue to help them keep it a safe place and also just be able to do my part as a social worker and engage as much as possible with my students. There have been a lot of resources that I have been able to give at my internship. So I have created a lot of like know your rights flashcards, and I have been able to provide that with families during the time where ICE was in Charlotte. probably a few months ago. It was not that long ago. We had a lot of families who felt like they couldn't bring their students to school. So we collaborated a lot with teachers and staff, and we came up with a plan to try to still have students come into school and do drop-offs and pickups. So we did collaborate a lot with families to be able to keep them safe because a lot of families did not feel safe getting out of their homes, or even just like when it came to food and necessities, we had a lot of other families come in and participate and donate and give a lot of canned foods, as well as be able to give families the resources that they needed. So it was very, very nice to see community come together and give these families what they needed during a harsh time, during a time where they felt like they had nobody. And I think it's just so valuable as a social worker to see that and see it come into play like in firsthand and like be a part of it and create so much change and be able to be a part of this population that, encourages safety, encourages that you have somebody there, you can still come and, you can still be in school and you can still learn, you can still bring your children and, you can still feel safe. And I think it's just so important how my internship prioritizes safety and engagement and a lot of collaboration between all staff, and even parents that, are involved with like even non-immigrant parents who just come in and understand and they read these emails and they fear safety, for all other students because they put themselves in their shoes as, parents as well who like, well, I would want my child to feel safe. I would want my child to get the education that they need. So it's just really cool to see that come into play. And I think that as social workers, it's just so important for us to challenge things and challenge the uncomfortable and get out of your comfort zone and be able to do things that you never thought you could have done. And I would have never imagined doing the things that I do. And it's just so special to be able to do that and special to be able to be in a position where I can have effect on children's lives and not even that, but families and be able to go like far beyond where I thought I could go. And it's just so cool to see engagement come into real life and come into play. And it's just so valuable and so cool to see it play like at my current internship.
Well said, well said. All right, so we're looking at a very culminating experience here, right?
Yeah.
With coming through the program and being able to do the work that you've already been passionate about over the course of your academic career and finishing that up at a great placement in a way, in a time, of course, that, we talk often about like systems and issues, but we don't necessarily say, well, we're talking about people's lives that are being impacted. So for you to be able to do that work right now, in a very important time, I think is absolutely admirable and important as well. And switching gears and keeping in with the BSW program, let's go with Maggie Allen next to share with us about again, this isn't just about the social work program, but also about yourself as a social worker and what really defines you and information that you think you bring to the table and helps show the interest that you have within the practice. So Maggie, tell us about yourself.
Hey y'all, thank you for having me, Professor Mills. This means a lot to me as I am a pretty non-traditional student. In a sense, I am older and I am a sex worker, and I've been a sex worker for a long time. I'm the stripper classmate, and I'm the kind of classmate that's not always palatable for everyone, but it's kind of hard for me to fake it sometimes. And I think with social work, a lot of the focus is on a certain area of addressing human trafficking without considering others. And so I want to bring forth a different perspective. um, I think it's important in social work that we differentiate between people who are victims of sex trafficking and people who consensually choose to do that work. And they do go hand in hand. However, by conflating the two and viewing all workers as these victims, it actually causes a lot of harm to the workers and the victims. So I think really looking further into that is important. And you know, it's tricky because fitting in at the program, it's like I have the most well-intentioned classmates say things to me like, "Oh, you're a stripper. That's so cool. Well, at least you're not a hooker. At least you're not selling it." And I'm like, you don't know what I've done or who I've been. And that's okay, because I don't want to admit to crimes on here, but my focus in social work is a lot of decriminalization. I fully believe and have read and listened to people where it's like, if you want to really address the issue of sex trafficking, you have to decriminalize this work because pushing people into the carceral system, it only further marginalizes them, consensual worker or victim of trafficking. And I think I guess, because I was looking at the questions from Professor Mills, I think my piece of advice that I would give anyone going into social work is to look within and think about your own biases when it comes to sex, sexuality, the exchange of sex for goods or services, um, and also your savior mindset. I'm just gonna name it like that. A lot of issues that face sex workers have to do with people who are not inside that world, have never been inside that world, have never known anyone inside that world speaking for them, and being like, okay, well, because of certain things that I believe about sex and sexuality, I'm gonna, make this law or this policy about it. And if nobody's looked into FOSTA SESTA, I highly encourage you to do so. And why sex workers and sex trafficking victims have said, hey, this actually is not helpful. Same with the Nordic model. And there's a lot of literature about it. I have some books I can recommend. This is one of them because I often hear, and it's okay and it's completely understandable because I am a white middle class sex worker. And so it's very easy for people to be like, well, this is who you are. So I'm not going to listen. And that look like that's I'm not denying that whatsoever. But the thing is, I'm going to use my voice to amplify those of others, of more marginalized groups. And I say to people, migrant sex workers can speak for themselves, and they do. And so it's like, listen to these people, get with us and have some conversations with us. Because I think that's really important. That's an important part of community outreach is getting in there and talking to people. And I don't mean go into the strip club and ask us 1,000 questions without paying us. Please don't do that. Um, but read the stories and look deeper into these articles and these studies that you read about sex work and porn and all these different things and these organizations that brand themselves on anti-trafficking, like look into it because a lot of organizations they'll say, oh, we're a non-religious anti-trafficking organization, but yet all the founders of it are Mormon. And so it's like, look deeper into things, question things within yourself. In social work, you will have clients who are engaging in survival sex. And as also, that's just how they're making a living. They're past a point of survival and they still choose to do this work. And that's another thing. It's like, God forbid, I'm out of survival mode and I'm still making this choice. Um, so it's a lot that goes into it. There's so much I can say. There's so much I will continue to say. But yeah, I hope I hit everything. There's conversations about consent. There's conversations about capitalism and labor and so much to say, but I want to respect everyone's time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, don't you worry, Maggie. We will be back, right? This is the point of giving this space. And also, and as questions pop up, because we do have a question in the chat for you, Maggie. Feel free to go ahead and if you want to, if you can see the chat, pop in the chat and answer the question there. And I'll also by the end make sure to come back to the chat so the folks who are watching this know the question and also can get information from there too. So if you see questions pop up in the chat and they're for you, feel free to go ahead and pop those in the answers in the chat as we continue on because Maggie, what you're really gleaning towards, and we've had these conversations before. Like I've had the pleasure of being able to be supportive of Jocelyn and Maggie in their BSW careers in the junior year, and Shaun and Crystal as their practicum instructor or practicum. Whatever I am within your practicum, as my interns for RASE for this year. So I do have an understanding of, of you all, like as your academics go. And Maggie, what you're gleaning towards is that concept of autonomy. And we're going to get to some more of this concept as well of people being able to live and work and be, but also we're all human. And that doesn't stop at the door of, or that difference between us as the professional, quote unquote, to us being the individual who is in need of support. Like we're all within communities, to the point Jocelyn was making earlier about like us being in community. It doesn't stop just because of where we position ourselves or how we're positioned in society within the community. So there's so much more there to education, bias, and all those other facets of ourselves that we have to address as we engage. And again, you're still social work students, so please don't think if you're a social work student watching this that you are or should be expected to be lesser than. Like your experience still matters, who you are still matters. Like you don't have to be a professional with 10 years of experience before you can say you are someone important within the community. Social workers, wherever we are in our education and learning, it's always ongoing. So your humanity shows no matter who you are, no matter where you are. So thank you, Maggie, for sharing that. And that was a very transparent take. That unfortunately we don't always get, and some folks don't always appreciate. So I appreciate again all the conversations as they come through, and we continue on here. Switching gears to Shaun Isaacs, who is my first MSW intern that started working with RASE last fall, and continue on to see this process through. And we still got some time, of course, before the semester ends. But Shaun has been here since the fall working. With this project and other projects throughout the semester. Shaun, take some time and tell the people who you are and some of the things that are important to you when it comes to social work as a student and social work as a practice at large as well.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today. I am a third year MSW student who started my internship with RAISE, and it's been a journey. I started out 27 years ago in social work and case management, and did it the opposite way, and then went back to school. The areas of that I've worked in has been in education, work experience, um, job development, and the last one was homelessness before I started school. In Charlotte, the homelessness population is various. You see the population that you see on TV, and then it's the population that really live within the community. There are families, there are individuals, there are VAs, veterans who are experiencing homelessness, but it's just not the fact that they're experiencing homelessness, but they're also experiencing joblessness. They're experiencing mental health, they experience substance abuse. So there's a multiple issues. It's not just finding housing, but it's also being able to come and assist them with the other barriers that they have. I've been working in directive services for a long time, and this has been the first time where I've been able to come and actually do research and see the policy side of it to make some kind of understanding of, as social workers, how do we do the work, be successful at the work, and don't get burnt out in doing the work. Sometimes the policies that are put in place kind of like ties our hands. And so as we're trying to meet needs, it sometimes seems endless, trying to provide services, just not being a Band-Aid, but also trying to put people's lives in a place where they can sustain themselves, as opposed to we fix this now until something breaks down and then we run back. So that's pretty much been my experiences. I've learned so much more from the community. I mean, when I say that, being in school for 3 years and learning the frameworks and modalities and approaches and all those things, and trying to um, process how to use those frameworks and approaches to fit the communities I serve. How and when does that fit? Because I realize that some of the stuff that I've learned may be a little bit difficult when you go back out there and you begin to serve people within the restraints of government funding and Medicaid and all the other things that go along with that. Uh, this semester, I was able to step out of the box. I did some things on disability. Um, I did a podcast, something that was out of my wheelhouse. Just walking around, talking to people, getting perspectives on how they see things, how the school may see things, um, how their department may see things, the differences in some of the way that they intersect, and sometimes how they divide from each other as we try to get an education in assist within a system. I find that everything's a system. The school is a system. The work that we do is a system. How we do the work is a system. Um, One of my concerns has been that I'm seeing that a lot of social workers are leaving the government systems, um, and starting their own grassroots kind of systems. Those those that can afford to do that. I find that those that have to be able to feed their families will stay in the systems, but will take the information from those systems and gravitate them into the grassroots side of it in order to try to implement change. Um, and so I realized with everything that I've learned in the last year that it takes all of us from whatever area we come from. It takes all of us from whatever position. Um, as Maggie said, well, I'm middle class. Somebody may say, well, I'm not middle class. I'm upper class or lower class. It takes everyone to have a voice who needs to pitch in. We're not here. Being I'm going to say this, being in social work for 27 years, you come in with the drive and the passion to want to help people. And as you start to engage others who are supposed to be doing the same thing, sometimes there are things that are said that you say, wow, you're supposed to be here to protect and provide services. So how can you say this? And so I'm learning that you got to hold space. For matter of fact, the name of the podcast is Holding Spaces. And so it's not, you have to be able to walk in a space that's not judgmental based on your biases. They speak about, being culturally responsive. You have to take each person as an individual and learn who that person is. You learn their needs. You learn where they come from. You learn the whys and the wheres and whatever to formulate what type of relationship as a social worker or as a case manager or just as a friend you can be to that person to bring that person to the level that they desire, their desires, their place of where they desire they want to be, not based on how I feel they should be, or how they live their lives, or how they make their money. That's not our obligation. Our obligation is to serve. Our obligation is to support. Our obligation is to inspire and uplift. So these are the things that I've learned thus far in this whole journey that I've been on, from being in the field to being in school to being in the internship. Um, and if anything, what I've learned is to not be afraid to step out of your box, whatever your box is, because you never know if this is where you're supposed to be. Maybe it's time to you to move to something different or move to a different population. Sometimes we as social workers, we get comfortable where we are because we know we can do, like the back of our hands. It's easy. But sometimes we have to just take that extra step and just go out and learn. One thing I have learned, I've touched everything. I've touched education. I've touched child protection services. I did that. I've touched teaching people how to find a job and maintain the skills and all that kind of things. I've touched homelessness. So I've touched the whole sphere of what the human being or human wellness um, has supposed to be. I've touched all those areas. And in each area, there's a need. But I've learned from each area, there's a person. And so, like they say, meet them where they are. I've learned to meet whatever each person, and it can be your peer in class, or your coworker. You meet each person where they are, and you grow from there. So that's the end of my spiel.
No, but that was very well said and very well received. And we're looking again at themes over the course of the day of the symposium and intersecting themes between the folks we've heard from so far between Jocelyn, Maggie, and Shaun. When it comes to community, hearing people from where they are, the authenticity that we have to bring if we intend to have people disclose and create discourse with us. Like, well, I'm going to ask you to be your most vulnerable, knowing that people come to social workers when they're already vulnerable to the system. And if I'm going to ask you to trust me, then that means we also have to be willing to do what we need to break down those barriers, build that trust, and understand an imperfect system. And when our place in it, I love that you all are mentioning class because the class component does play a part in how we're received and how we reach out and how it's part of us, right? We might not have created the system, but we're within the system wherever we are. So very well received, very well stated, and we're going to wrap out the intros as we get ready to switch gears to the back half because y'all are just already killing it. So y'all making my job much easier just by being yourselves and engaging. So Crystal Kidd, our most recent intern with RASE, who again was instrumental in bringing together our community supports from our other two sessions. To come together to speak on their work and their efforts as well. Crystal, let the people know who you are and what you're about.
Hey everyone, my name is Crystal. It's so good to be here. I can't believe it's already come together and it's happening and we're here. It's exciting though. It's good to see your work come together and be successful. So it's definitely been rewarding. But yeah, I am in my final year of the 3-year MSW program. I feel like I've been here for a lifetime. But finally reaching the end. I've been in social work for about 5 years now. I did social work for a couple of years before officially deciding to do the master's program. So I got a little bit of experience before officially making that decision. And it's funny because as you were talking, I was thinking about the journey that I've been on since starting the program 3 years ago and what a journey it has been. I was thinking about, like, when I applied to the program, like where my head was at, what I thought the future would look like, what I wanted to do. And I guess it is kind of similar. I have a background in Head Start. That was my first big girl job. I guess you can say I was a family advocate for Head Start. And I had been working a lot with the mental health specialist there. And I was like, well, maybe I have a future in early childhood mental health. Ended up leaving that job and getting a job with a nonprofit that did work with individuals living with HIV and AIDS. Fell in love with that role. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, but I will get to that in a second. And then now I'm currently in care management, again, doing work for early childhood mental health. So I guess I made a full circle. But a lot of things have happened in the 3 years. And, at the time when bad things were happening, it may not have been what I wanted to happen at the time, but it has taught me so much and been so beneficial for me as a social worker. The reason why I am Professor Mills's intern is because the nonprofit that I was at, Positive Wellness Alliance, I was there for about 2 years, ended up losing their funding last year and ended up closing their doors. So I got a very different practicum experience last semester in that I was helping our executive director, Beth Matfield, close the organization down. So I got a lot of experience, but it was also a very emotional experience for me, especially because, when I first got the job, I was just picturing myself being there long term, hopefully getting a leadership role one day and just being able to have a job that I was really passionate about and really loved. And then it kind of came crashing down right in front of me. But, again, I was able to, I won't say able to, I was forced to, because I didn't have a choice, to learn more about policies and funding and nonprofits and how the funding works and how it's awarded and how easily it can be taken away. Unfortunately, I had to learn that because it personally impacted me, and I wish it hadn't happened like that, but it did end up, working like that. But now I have a better understanding of how that works. I have a better understanding of how decisions are made at the federal level, at the state level. So while the experience was very sad, and I miss Positive Wellness Alliance, and I miss the people that we were working with, the people that we served. I'm so grateful for that experience, and I will definitely carry that with me for the rest of my time as a professional. So that is why I'm here, and I'm grateful to be here. I tell Professor Mills, this is not necessarily something that I would have chosen if I was given the choice, but I'm so glad to be here because I wanted to get more meso and macro experience and step out of my comfort zone. So glad to be here. And as Shaun was saying, I wrote some notes down because I wanted to touch on the same points. She mentioned, stepping outside of your box, stepping outside your comfort zone, and I just thought to myself, you are going to be put outside of your comfort zone, whether you choose to or not. You are going to be put outside your comfort zone. I've had some really great mentors through bosses, executive directors. I don't know if Beth is on here, but Beth with Positive Wellness Alliance, she is an amazing mentor and friend to me. She put me outside my comfort zone, didn't give me a choice. So, at the time it was painful, but I appreciate everything that she did for me. And having mentors like that is really beneficial. So, yeah, I think that's all for right now. But yeah, just happy to be here. So excited to see it coming through.
Yes, and I think I want to say because it sounded like Crystal, you mentioned seeing my work. This is ours, right? This is this event, this thing that we're finishing up today, and over the course of the semester has been working on it is a work of multiples, right? So and of time, and I appreciate that you all were able to, Shaun and Crystal, come into a space that was not your first intention, and that's also very similar to if we're looking at social work for students, when we're looking at your practicum placements, the thing that you might like. Here's where I plan to be versus here's what's available, based off of like those needs does not mean it won't and cannot be a beneficial experience, but also know it's about growth and it's about your ability to be able to pivot at times, right? Social workers, we meet certain situations and experiences, and sometimes we got to change on it. We got to pivot and switch it up. And this is a great time for students, I think, to be able to not necessarily comfortably for a lot of reasons. It's unpaid labor oftentimes. It's intensive when it comes to the time frames and the balance of all the work that you do. That doesn't mean just your graduate level. That means undergraduate as well. There's just so much that goes into it that can make it complicated. But beneficial, I think that goes without saying that these are very beneficial, informative times for social work education. Um, so first, thank you all for sharing those great intros to your work, what's important to you, yourselves, where you are, and really creating a very transparent space. Because I want to switch back to you, Maggie, because there's a few questions in the chat that I think really focus on not just some general concepts, but some points, especially about transparency. So there's one question that was asked about by Bridget Glover. She mentioned she wants to speak with you, and I'll open the door for a conversation between you, or just Maggie, how you want to respond to the next part of this, where she mentions having worked for 3 years with survivors of domestic violence, sex trafficking, now working with homeless individuals and SPMIs. And she's working on her second year of her MSW, but want to go towards macro work for advocacy. For advocacy, I think it's peace. For the for the advocacy piece, your authenticity and perspective is more than palatable, it's craved. So the idea that as she's working through this and wanting to work in a space that's within the advocacy and the macro level, and for that advocacy piece that you were talking about, like your authenticity that you brought into this, and I'll share for you, Maggie. You might not want to say this, but I will. Maggie coming into the program was very hesitant on, that transparency, which is perfectly fine. I wouldn't tell anyone to just go out anywhere and just share your story, but to see her growth and ability to let that part of her story, her life be a wholeness conversation, not a hidden part of me, because we often do that in society, where depending on how we see that part of you, will decide if we're going to accept you or not. So Maggie, to the point that was being made there, can you share more about just your transparency and just the ways in which you are able to hone in on sharing your story, especially one that we do know in society women are already victimized and sexualized, much less in a role in a space where you're saying, no, I am do, not did, am, and what that's like in the space that you're in right now.
Sure. And can you say the name again of who would like to speak with me? Because I
Yeah,
am
that was Bridget
ecstatic.
Glover.
I would love to. Absolutely.
Yep, Bridget Glover.
Okay, I'll email you and we can make arrangements for that because I would be honored. Um, I think I think frontal lobe development had to do with it, quite frankly, and being like, life is short. I am who I am. I'm tired of hiding this part of myself because it has so much to do with why I'm even here in the first place. And it's like, no, I'm not going to keep lying and saying that I'm a bartender or a waitress. Like, no, this is what I do. This is what I see. These are the things that I've seen. These are the things I've been through. I'm also a survivor of domestic violence and other forms of violence. And so I think it's very important that we have these uncomfortable conversations and we talk about it and we amplify the voices of those who have experienced these things. And, and I think Professor Mills, also shout out to you because you encouraged me to, live your truth. And it's like, I think another part of it is I was raised in the Catholic Church. So, I have a mother who's very like, all right, like when she first found out about it, she was really pissed. We didn't speak for a long time, but she came around and it's still like to this day, it's like, you need to be hush hush. I accept you. I support you. I've come around, but you can't speak about this with certain family members. And I often have to pull certain family members aside and be like, can I really tell you like what I'm doing and how I'm like doing this? Because I would like to tell you and I would like for you to know, but don't tell my mom I told you, kind of thing. Um, but then when I did start talking about it more openly, I was honestly surprised at the number of people who were so cool about it. And that's not to say that I didn't have to correct them several times because it's like, oh, you support me and you want to have these conversations, but I'm seeing you like this post on Instagram, which is spewing some rhetoric that is not helpful. So I'm gonna have to check you right here, but still love you and thank you for being open to a different perspective and a different point of view. And I can't thank everyone enough for being so cool and, you know, accepting me and stuff. So I hope that answers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was to the point. I was looking at, and I've got the contact information. I'll share that with you, Maggie,
Okay.
for Bridget. To the point, I think going and kind of pivoting back to Jocelyn here, because you're talking about what the support that you had, Maggie, like your ability to, once you're able to, and I mean that there's likely a whole other conversation we could have of what's it like to have to say, all right, I want you to accept me, or like that the applaud for acceptance. Like we do that a lot when it comes to people. Oh, so courageous, so brave of you, but we don't put the system on display for like, all right, so why are you making it so hard for people to just live? And we give you a level, we give people a level of um the thumbs up, the appreciation, but are we actively trying to change the system that otherwise makes it difficult for you to then otherwise be and live your truth without having to, be this moral value compass for someone to say, hey, well, guess what I got? And we put you on our back and say, well, I know this person's is like this, whether or not you're actually supporting them openly or not. That's, we can go there else times,
Right.
right? But
I'm like, I
Jocelyn,
stopped caring about that a little bit ago.
and I think that also does take, it takes a lot and it takes a toll in itself, right? And Jocelyn, you're
Yes.
talking about, being a part of supporting these families who are impacted by, because we had Albert representatives from Outbridge for Kids and International House on earlier, and we were talking about, the impact to immigration services as ICE and the raids that were happening and are still ongoing because even though, we don't have the raid by name happening, we do know that there's still a presence in the area. What's it look like from that you've seen, Jocelyn, for those family member or those community members who do and do not have support? Like if it are when you're the support, when your organization, when the work that you do is the support they have versus when they have other supports that might be more familiar or close to them.
Well, I feel like it looks like on a different range of support systems because it just depends on where that family is being affected and what they're going through, the needs that they need, or what they're experiencing in all those situations. For example, we did have a student who his family is an immigrant family, and he was also an immigrant, and he migrated here when he was in fourth grade, I believe, and he's been here since that point on, and he's now in sixth grade. And during the whole time with the ice raids and everything, I had I was in his class and I was just observing and shadowing, and I noticed that he seemed upset because he always comes and he says hi and he talks to me in Spanish. So it's just like how we communicate with each other. And I noticed that he wasn't speaking to me. So I was like, oh, like, something must be going on. So like I went up to him and I asked him, I was like, hey, like, how are you? And then he told me, he was like, oh, I'm upset. I'm like, I feel scared. And I asked him, I was like, well, why do you feel scared? And he told me, well, I feel like my family is going to be taken away from me, or like they're going to come and take me from school. Can you assure me that, I'm going to be safe in school? And I assured him and I affirmed him and I told him, you're going to be safe in school. Nothing's going to happen to you here. We promise that to keep you safe. And obviously, when it comes to like safety measures and like the law and everything, they are not allowed to just come into school and like, ask questions or anything. And we have signs in our doors that say like, if anybody comes, they're not allowed to just budge in or anything like that. So I affirmed him and I made him, feel safe, and I assured that he wasn't like nothing was going to happen. And throughout the day, well, I kept that in the back of my mind, and I was like, okay, well, like, I have to put myself in like, well, I can't put myself in his shoes, but I can reflect and I can understand as in a point of view of also coming from an immigrant family and also understanding, well, like the stressors of, okay, like if my family is gone, like I know how that feels, or like I feel unsafe. And like throughout the day he wasn't able to focus. He just didn't want to do work. He felt very upset. He was very sad. And a few weeks passed by and we get me and my supervisor were told that he was removed from the school. So during that time it was very like emotional for me because it was my first time experiencing this, as well as like my first internship and actually being able to engage with the community, and being able to learn these things and learn all the things that it comes with working with the immigrant community. And I felt like I couldn't do anything. I felt hopeless. I felt like, I wasn't able to like reassure him that he wasn't going to be safe, that he was going to be safe in school, because we were just told that he was removed from the school and mom made the measures to go back to their country. So it was just really difficult in that situation to be able to do anything after that. And I took it on and I reflected and I realized that, obviously all families have different situations. And when it comes to being able to like use your voice to advocate and like do as much as you can, there's only so much that you can do for these communities and for these families. But being able to like assure and like make him feel safe in the moment felt very important to me, and it felt very valuable. And throughout the, like throughout time now at my how like when it is now, and like with all the families that we do work with that are immigrant families, it just really, I take it into consideration. And when it comes to these matters, when we just don't know when things are going to shift or when they're going to change. So it's just a lot of like reassuring and making them feel safe and making them feel welcome and making them feel sure that they're going to be safe and sound and that they have the support that they need and all the resources that we can be able to provide them with. And I think like that's the most important thing that we can do as a support system. And even though as difficult as it is working within this population and how hard it can be sometimes, I feel like being able to do as much as you can in your part is what's most important, even when it comes to like situations like that.
Very, very well stated. And I love how you keep mentioning the support system, right? Um, because again, going to those social workers, and those social work terms, looking at that multi-level system, right? The micro, meso, and macro. And we know, and I've talked about this with Crystal and Sean as well as in my other classes, that they're interconnected, right? They're micro and meso and macro, or they're names and terms, because when we're thinking about the work that we do, I can't imagine that any one of you are like, all right, I love to help you, but I am not macro when it comes to trying to figure out
Right.
how do we support cultural changes and policy changes as we can, or either informing or engaging. We don't say, all right, so I'd love to help you, but I'm not, we're going to talk to the people, whether or not, like, I need to talk to your representative. I don't want to talk to you. Like, we don't do that. We meet people where and as we are, as much as possible. So that support system, it can look like a lot of things, right? It can look like you. It can look like the person who has no degree whatsoever, but there's someone who is beneficial and caring and safe to be around. There's so much that goes into it. And I think that's the point of where we're talking about social work as a practice and the ways that what shapes the community is it doesn't take a degree to do this. Now, you of course have to have the degree to do the job, but by the time you're doing the work, likely you've had this in your soul before you came here. And not to get to the spiritual side of all this, but like there's something within you that pushes for something past just helping, just being an ear for, and to be a part of change. And that's what all of you have discussed in your own ways and the work that you do, either using your personal experiences or where you've come from, is how to be a part of change. And as we kind of wrap this up, I mean, we're down to the last 14 minutes and this has gone by as the day has. So thank y'all for being a part of this and being here. I want to wrap up this conversation. I'm going to go back to you, Shaun, to kind of start the process of us kind of rewinding this thing together. For folks who are coming into this space, for folks who are social workers, because I know you've mentioned yourself, you're coming from, you had the experience, then you're coming back to the education, and you're going to go back from the education with more experience into the world, having pivoted and engaged in the world differently. What's some jewels, some words of wisdom you would provide to someone who either is in a similar space of especially coming in? I think that's a good place for you to talk to is those non-traditional students who are pivoting on a career that has been however many years in the making and they're going back for something else. What's some jewels or gems you would get to them to kind of support them on their renewed trip or space that they're going to engage in?
The first thing I would say is do your homework. And when I say do your homework, really reflect inside why you want to do this work. If it's the type of work that if you weren't getting a paycheck, you would still be out there doing it, then this is the place for you. The second thing I would say is you have to be open outside of your biases, outside of your expectation, because you're dealing with people. And the third thing I would say is um, pat yourself on the back because sometimes it doesn't seem like you're really doing the work or that you're making an impact or that you're influencing. We can't save the world, but we can at least try to help one person at a time, one day at a time. You take it at a time, but you have to give yourself forgiveness if you drop the ball. You just pick it back up. We're human, um, and be encouraged. Stay supportive. Continue to advocate when you can, and it's okay to say I can't. Maybe sometimes you got to grab somebody else who's doing the work that you're doing and say, hey, I need to lock arms with you because I'm not sure. And two people go together, but it's a day by day thing that you a day by day journey that you find yourself in. And if you just look at it that way, as opposed to, you know, the goals that we build for ourselves, the lives that we think we're building for ourselves. We all know one of the speakers earlier said, life be life and life lives. So therefore, you just take it one day at a time. And you wake up every day and say, I'm going to do the best that I can for whatever the day holds. And you just move forward.
Fantastic. Well stated and well said, Shaun. Crystal, let's go with you as you are going to be you're done until you get that PhD, and I can't wait to hear how that process goes for you. But for folks who are finishing that journey again, similar space as Shaun, who have a longer trajectory because you're looking at a 3-year program that takes time and having a career prior to and some transitions and changes. What would you say to someone who might be dealing with, because I know it's possible to deal with these transitions that you can't plan for? How would you advise them, or what some gems that you would provide to them?
Yeah, I would definitely say, first of all, no to the PhD. um, I would say to kind of like what Shaun said, to remember your why. I mean, there's in these last 3 years, me and my classmates, I'm sure you all on here have had times where it has just been too much. We have school, we have work, we have other responsibilities. Maybe some of us have kids, whatever we have going on. There has been several times where I just thought about hanging up my hat and just being done and saying, I'm not doing this right now or at all. But remembering my why, remembering why I decided to, get on the computer and apply to the program in the first place has really helped me kind of stay grounded. And I know I have a friend who's in a different program right now, and she texted me actually not too long ago. She just started last fall, so she's still kind of new. She was like, "Please tell me that you thought about quitting several times in the last 3 years." And I was like, "Oh yeah, you're good. Like, just remember, we had a conversation about remembering why she applied in the first place, and it really helped her." So that would be my number one piece of advice. As far as like being in the profession and how to do the best work, I would say it's just be prepared to build relationships. And I have had pretty much all micro experience in the last 5 years, but I think that also applies to the meso and the macro as well. For me, I think probably 90% of my job is building relationships, whether that be with the children that I work with, the families that I work with, reaching out to other organizations, to mental health providers or doctors or whoever it may be. And you might be reaching out to community organizations or even representatives and, kind of advocating for different needs in the community. And, that's not necessarily in my job description of any of the roles that I've had, to be honest, but that has what worked best for me in my experience. It's been the most beneficial for children, families, clients, whoever I've worked with. That has just been the number one thing. And kind of like what Shaun said again earlier, she was talking about building relationships and learning people. That is a big part of the job as well. Again, even if you're doing micro, meso, macro, it doesn't matter. Learning who you are working with, whether that be, an individual, a family, a coworker, an organization, whatever, a lot of the time is going to be spent just learning about people and genuinely putting time into doing that. And I think that's going to give you the best outcomes because people are going to see that you care. And I've learned really quickly that social work, the world is small when it comes to social work. You're going to run into people that that you knew 5 years ago, that you knew 10 years ago. So, I don't want to say you always want to leave a good impression, but I think that you want to genuinely care. And I think that's at the heart of social work. We're in it because we care for people, we care for others. So just remembering why and then being prepared to build relationships, that's going to look different for everyone, but that's definitely important.
Fantastic. Again, that relationship, that community conversation has been ongoing throughout the afternoon as well. Switching gears to our BSW students, I want to make sure as well that we're amplifying the idea that you don't have to get an MSW to be a great social worker. And I think that's always a kind of a part of education is that, we hit that point of a certain degree and we're like, all right, this is beneficial, right? And there's definitely systemic value to getting an MSW. But if you're a BSW student listening to this right now, you're like, you know what? I'm not sure if that's for me. It doesn't have to be because it's a great place for you, and you can be a great social worker regardless of your degree. So switching gears to our current BSW students, Jocelyn, I'm gonna start with you. Jewels that you have for folks who are coming into the program as we wrap things up. What are some gems that you can provide to them?
Well, first of all, I would say definitely get involved with engagement, advocacy, get out there, do your research, stay educated. Even if it's informing your friends, your peers, your classmates, your family, it's just so important to stay informed with all current things that are happening, especially in our current times and how it seems like every day we have something new. It's just so important to stay on top of that and also just get involved with protesting. I've engaged a lot in protests throughout my whole undergrad. I feel like I've been to a lot of protests, whether if it's on campus, whether if it's outside of campus. I think it's just so cool to see community come together and just engage with one another and get to know new people and get to meet others. And you meet a lot of nurses, teachers, doctors, like everyone that you would ever think of, like engaging in these protests. And if they're coming out here, it just makes you think like, wow, like, anybody can come out here. Like we see dogs, we see like people bringing their pets out. Like it's just so cool being able to see that. And, you're there for a good cause. You're there using your voice and doing things that you never could have imagined you done. And, just getting involved and spreading awareness on social issues on disparities, on things that are going on around the world, or just being able to talk about things and get uncomfortable. And it's just the most important part about social work because it challenges you to do things that you never thought you could have done, or just being able to engage in things that you never thought you could have done. And it's just so cool to be able to do that. And I think that if you're coming into social work, well, you're going to get uncomfortable and you're going to learn things and you're going to question your abilities and you're going to question things. And I think that's just like the most valuable part about social work. So, yeah.
Props, props. And as I mentioned with Maggie earlier, I'm going to say with Jocelyn as well, being able to see the growth in the year's time of where they started or before they really got into the process and the practicum. It's been amazing to see her growth and the true value of the authenticity. When she says she's an advocate, she will be there standing with you in support as an ally. She means it and she will be it and she has been it, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So I love that you were speaking from that space, Jocelyn. It's been amazing to see you grow. And switching in to finish this thing out, Maggie, take us home. You've dropped tons of jewels and gems for us for the day. Share with us some gems you have for folks who are coming in again from speaking to that authenticity of us as a person. What do you got for the people?
I would I could, I could think of a lot of them that were gems for me, but it won't be the same for everybody. But get ready to confront your biases. That's one of my biggest ones. Mine was the church because I have religious trauma, and through social work, I've been able to see so much good work that the church does, and also just learning about history, different churches. That serve different populations, what they've been able to do and build. And, you know, it was a very beautiful thing, especially at my practicum, because I'm at Carolina's Care Partnership and I work with individuals who are living with HIV. And so many of them, I would ask them when I checked in with them, what are your supports in your circle right now? And they'd be like, my relationship with God. And I was like, you know what? Hell yeah. Like, yeah. And so I would say, get ready to confront your own biases. I know this is not feasible for everybody, but if you get a summer job and you're able to save some money because stuff's gonna come up and you're gonna be doing that unpaid internship likely. And it's tough. Like, it's tough, and I can't give the perfect answer on how to self-care and make time for this and that. I'm like, just get through it. Get through it. Like, do what you need to do. Um, it's it's tough. It's gonna be tough. And you're gonna cry. I've cried a lot, and I know I sound kind of silly right now, but that's how I deal with it. But you will be great, and understand that this field. I know I'm probably not supposed to say this right now, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Is political. So think about that. Think about your values and what you're willing to challenge about how you've been raised and what you've been conditioned to believe. Because I've seen some questionable things. I'll leave it at that.
No, thank you, thank you. And if we cannot say that social work is political, we should have stopped this thing before it started earlier this morning because I'm pretty sure
Exactly.
I've gone far further in that space. But
Okay.
social work is a political practice. Social
Yes.
work is a practice that's going to engage in political discourse and discussion, and we're going to challenge and hopefully challenge the system and the biases, and we're going to try to do more than just challenge it, but we're going to try to change it from within and from outside as well, which is a part of where all of the work that you've all done, our other panelists and the folks who are listening to this, I do believe at least have something in their core of their heart that they want to be a part of that change process. We live in an imperfect world, but that does not mean it has to stay that way. But it takes doing all the things you've all mentioned here, challenging your biases, right? Being prepared for the long haul, checking in with folks, asking for help, building community supports, and being prepared to pivot and change things up. And you know what, saying sometimes just throwing your hands up, going, no, I'm not. But we all know that at some point we're going to not be here. We're not always going to be the ones, and we don't need to be. So wherever you are in this space, as a social worker, as a support, as someone in need of support, wherever you are, we are a community, and that's the big thing that builds us together in this social community. Is we're all here, and really, it's distance that separates us. It's not really our stories. It's not really the world around us. It's the things that we, it's our ability to touch one another, right? And social justice is always going to be there as a need, no matter what others may say, and no matter what systems might be in front of us. So continue, thrive, engage, get through it, whatever that looks like. If it looks like self-care, do it. If it looks like I just got to put my head down and bear the storm, bear it, but know that there's something, we hope this can be better for you on the other side. So thank you to the folks who have viewed this, who have been here, all of our panelists over the course of the day. It has been very beneficial. My heart is full. Y'all owe me nothing when it comes to the putting this together and being a part of it. And I hope I'm able to continue to give back to your work, your careers, your wherever you go in the future as we continue on. So thank y'all, Crystal, Jocelyn, Shaun, Maggie, for taking this home on, I think, the highest note one that I've prepared for. But thank you for being here, and I look forward to our follow-up conversations and our futures as well. Y'all take care.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank y'all so much.